ado, I shall hand over to Peter to talk on the theme of Manchester non-conformity as a context for being a Baptist biblical scholar. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chris. You should have a handout on your seat, which just gives an outline and bibliography. Many thanks for the invitation to participate in today's reflections on Baptists and biblical scholarship. As a Baptist scholar, joining the Department of Religions and Theology at Manchester in the late 1990s, and also teaching for a while at one of the non-conformist colleges, I was immediately aware that the context for theological scholarship in Manchester was very different from the other three universities I've been associated with. Cambridge and Oxford were strongly marked by the presence of Anglican institutions, from chapels to theological colleges. University of Liverpool had no theology at all. By contrast, institutions with which they had no, by statute, there was a statutory ban on it until quite recently. They do have some, religious studies that talk about, but by contrast, institutions with which University of Manchester were linked were primarily non-conformist. Students from the Methodist College took the University BD. The university validated degrees taken by URC, Congregational, Methodist, Nazarene, Unitarian and Baptist students. Tutors at several colleges offered lecture courses at the university. This link with nonconformity runs right back to the origins of the Faculty of Theology in 1904, and its roots go even deeper. I also became aware that the department was very unrestrictive in the religious angles from which we could do research. F.F. Bruce attributed that freedom to the general fact of teaching in a UK university. He writes, "There are biblical and theological schools which are instituted to foster one particular system of doctrine or to train for one denomination. It's natural and proper that such schools should include an outline of beliefs or practices to which teachers are expected to subscribe. I have friends who teach in schools like these, and for the most part they do not appear to be conscious of any limitation on freedom. But I am thankful that the lines have fallen to me in a university environment and not in that of a theological college." However, at Manchester, this academic religious freedom goes back much further than at other universities. It also appears to me to have been more far-reaching. In 1959, when he was appointed to the Rylands chair, Bruce's membership of the Plymouth Brethren would, I think, have worked against him if applying for the named chairs at Cambridge, Oxford or Durham. Also, institutions without Manchester's prior history were unlikely to have had a Baptist biblical scholar, H.H. Rowley, on the appointment committee, about which Bruce comments, "More than once, when I was asked a question, Professor Rowley answered it for me before I could do so for myself." As well as the history of the faculty, it seems to me that the ethos of the whole city provides an environment conducive to nonconformist theological scholarship and particularly Baptist theological scholarship. This paper is in two parts. Part one argues that features of mainly 19th and early 20th century Manchester nonconformity produced conditions in which Baptist theological educators, especially biblical scholars, could be prominent members of a university theology faculty. Part two considers results that this brought about, arguing that there were probably positive and negative effects on life in Baptist churches. So, part one, 7 features of Manchester nonconformity enabling Baptist university involvement. Retrospective articles on the University of Manchester Faculty of Theology were written after 50 years by T.W. Manson and after 75 years by Ronald Preston, David Palin and Morna Hooker. On the 100th anniversary of the faculty, now reorganised into the Department of Religions and Theology, John Rogerson produced a further retrospective. This was followed by a bulletin of the John Rylands Library volume, edited by Timothy Larson, looking at the century of Rylands professors. This coincided with the bicentenary of what became Northern Baptist College, for which Peter Shepherd produced a history. These sources point consistently to a number of factors in Manchester nonconformist Christianity that contributed to creation of a faculty in which Baptist biblical scholars could play a prominent part. I will add a further factor based on the ethos of the city. So, 1. Nonconformists had central roles in the 1851 founding and leadership of Owens College. John Owens, a businessman from a Congregationalist background, left money in 1846 for founding of a university college. Shepherd comments, "Most opportunities for pursuing higher education in England were then under the control of the established church. As a Congregationalist, Owens stipulated that there should be no test of religious opinion for students at the college, and that nothing should be taught that would be offensive to anyone's religious views." As Manson notes, these provisions chimed with an influential paper presented to the Manchester Statistical Society by Henry Longville Jones in 1836, his Plan of a University for the Town of Manchester. Manson writes that it included theology with 3 provisions. A, it was to be taught in the university. B, it was not to be taught in an authoritarian manner. And C, the teaching in it was to be distributed among the various denominations. Manson continues, "Nothing practical came of Mr. Jones's plan at the time. It was, however, talked about. And among those who discussed it were some who afterwards became governors and trustees of Owens College. Jones's 3 points were an accurate forecast of what was to happen when a faculty of theology was established in the university." Owens cemented nonconformist influence in the college by nominating trustees from all the leading Protestant religious bodies in Manchester, including the Baptists. The resulting shape of the trustee body was presumably a significant factor in the striking choice of first college principal, Alexander John Scott. Scott was ordained in the Church of Scotland in 1823. Rogerson, drawing on the work of J.P. Newell, discusses how Scott was stripped of his licence to preach in 1831 because he could not sign the Westminster Confession. He was also accused of an unorthodox view on the humanity of Christ. More dramatically, Scott was convinced that gifts of the Spirit are available today. In 1830, he published Neglected Truths, Hints on 1 Corinthians 14, and preached during an outbreak of Pentecostal phenomena in the west of Scotland. Similar events followed in London when Scott joined Edward Irving. Scott ministered in Woolwich until 1846, then moved to London where he joined with F.D. Morris, Charles Kingsley and others in founding what became the Christian Socialist movement. In 1848, Scott was appointed Professor of English Language and Literature at University College London, to which he added in 1849 the chair in English Language and Moral Philosophy at the newly founded Ladies' College in Bedford Square. When Scott was appointed to lead Owens College, he also became Professor of Hebrew, of Comparative Grammar and English Language and Literature, and of Logic and Mental and Moral Philosophy. Scott also taught a voluntary course, Religion in Relation to the Life of a Scholar. Further lecturers in biblical languages and related subjects were appointed. As Rogerson argues, key elements of a theology degree were being taught at Owens College well before there was a theology faculty and degree programme. 2. Many nonconformists in 19th century Manchester had desire and wealth to open theological colleges. On the origins of the theology faculty, Preston asks and answers, why was its foundation possible? The chief reason was the influx of nonconformist theological colleges in Manchester from 1840. The Anglican element was very small by comparison. By 1903, There were 8 denominational theological colleges in Manchester. They produced a remarkable group of scholars on whom the university could call for teaching and the supervision of research. Similarly, Manson writes, "There, the outstanding and vital thing is the foundation of the various theological colleges which have, from the very beginning of the faculty up to the present time, played so great a part in its work. The theological colleges provided a solid basis on which a faculty could be established." Manson mentions Lancashire Independent College, Anglican, Baptist, Moravian and Unitarian colleges, and 3 Methodist colleges, Didsbury, Hartley, which was Primitive Methodist, and Victoria, which was United Methodist. He mentions teachers, quote, "eminent in their own subject and easily able to take their place among other experts in any academic setting, including J.T. Marshall of the Baptist College." The Baptist College was actually rather late on the scene. As Shepherd discusses, Baptists in the north were divided in location and ideas. Although Manchester was proposed for a college as early as 1805, a key minister in the city, William Gadsby, was adamantly resistant to any broad Baptist cooperation in training. The North's first Baptist college was set up at Horton in Bradford. The first substantial college in Lancashire opened in 1866, a strict Baptist college at Chamber Hall, Bury, just north of Manchester. In 1871, the college moved to Brighton Grove, a mile south of Owens College, becoming Manchester Baptist College. Point 3. Non-conformist college students attended classes at Owens College. Even though Chamber Hall was very conservative, advanced students were taking Latin, Greek and Hebrew at Owens College from the beginning. Owens College was a major attraction in the Lancashire Baptist Association discussions that led to the establishment of Chamber Hall. There was no apparent reluctance for this and the other non-conformist colleges to engage with lectures at Owens College related to biblical subjects, including potentially controversial subjects of textual and other types of criticism. This continued when Owens College became in 1880 one component of the Victoria University, based in Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds. Point 4. Nonconformists were fragmented, leading to proliferation of small colleges. Shepherd reports that, like the 3 Baptist colleges operating in the North and Midlands in the 19th century, nonconformist colleges generally had a couple of tutors and a couple of dozen students. None of the Manchester colleges was large enough to staff a reasonable range of courses. This reinforced dependence on the university. Conversely, it provided students for university courses helping to build numbers, strengthening the case for creation of a theology faculty. Point 5. Nonconformist colleges were willing to collaborate with each other and the university. The university was also willing to collaborate with them. Even though the colleges were fragmented, they were happy to work together. Also, some willingness of Owens College lecturers to work with the colleges stemmed from some teaching at the colleges. The most prominent at the foundation of the faculty was T.F. Tout. Tout's widow, Manson quotes Tout's widow, "My husband was one of a group who worked hard and long for the establishment of the Faculty of Theology. His work as Bishop Fraser Lecturer in Ecclesiastical History, his work for the Schola Episcopi, and his close links with Lancashire College," that's the independent college, where he lectured, and with all the nonconformist colleges, made him eager for the establishment of the faculty to encourage theological research and to bind scholars of all churches. In 1890 and 1900, proposals for a Victoria University Faculty of Theology were put forward by successive principals of Owens College. Manson notes that Liverpool were indifferent, Leeds actively hostile. religion remained a controversial issue, especially with worry about sectarianism. The creation of a Faculty of Theology came about as one of the first acts after the 1903 splitting of the Victoria University to create the universities of Manchester, Liverpool and Leeds. Point 6. Nonconformists, one especially, funded university professorships and world-class supporting facilities. On the Rylands chair, Larson writes, "It was the first British university professorship in biblical and theological studies that was not restricted in terms of the religious identity of the occupant, and thus A.S. Peake became the first nonconformist to hold such a position. Indeed, one might say that the chair is indelibly stamped with dissent, as it is named in honour of John Rylands, a wealthy 1801 to 1888, a wealthy Congregationalist, and his widow, Enriqueta Augustina Rylands, 1843 to 1908, who gave so generously in order to help found and develop the world-famous John Rylands Library. Enriqueta Rylands also funded, during her lifetime, the university chair in comparative religion. I'd add that she was a very active participant in the development of the Rylands collection. Elizabeth Gow's just been finishing a PhD on her as a collector. She's an amazing person, Enriqueta. Point 7. The City of Manchester's cultural nonconformity sits well with the Baptist ethos. Andy Spinoza's 2023 book, Manchester Unspun, Pop, Property and Power in the Original Modern City, documents Manchester's reinvention from 1970s post-industrial wasteland to high-rise media capital. He traces regeneration from TV presenter Tony Wilson through his factory records and Hacienda Club to the city's broader cultural, academic and commercial development. The university picks up on this publicity. Renowned Manchester champion Anthony H. Wilson famously said, "This is Manchester, we do things differently here." And when it comes to innovation, the university is no exception. From the splitting of the atom and the creation of the first stored computer to the suffragette movement, innovation is nothing new at Manchester. Here, innovation is sitting alongside a somewhat rebellious independence. That can be seen right back in the 19th century. Even earlier, my distant relative Samuel Crompton, whose spinning mule powered the Industrial Revolution, is among many of examples of nonconformist, in his case Swedenborgian, creativity combined with an anti-authoritarian independence bordering on the self-destructive. There is a rebellious, pragmatic creativity characteristic of Manchester. This is nonconformist in a general sense. It also fits with my understanding of Baptist biblical scholarship, not tied to the norms of society or to a centrally directive denomination, committed to a principle that the Spirit works through each local church, willing to speak in new ways, but doing so with an eye to practical effects in the life of churches and society, and willing to work together with others, but without compromising independence. Part 2. 7 results of the faculty being created in this way. 1. Baptist gained a base in the university setting that was robust because its link with colleges made it well-resourced and cost-effective. Manson reports. From the outset, there was close cooperation between the university and the colleges. In the session 1905-6, lectures for the BD were given in the university itself, in the Anglican College, Lancashire Independent College, Didsbury College, and the Baptist, Unitarian and Moravian colleges. Preston comments that of the 12 lectures printed in the 1905 faculty launch volume, 7 are by members of college staffs. He notes that one was J.T. Marshall, principal of the Baptist College. Preston writes that the colleges enabled a range and variety of teaching which would have been quite impossible if the faculty had been confined to full-time teaching staff. and also a steady supply of students. This was especially true for the first 50 years when, he says, the primary concern of the faculty was with ministerial training. Involvement of college staff included some holding professorships, for instance, Peake at Hartley College and the great grammarian J.H. Moulton at Didsbury College. College staff also held the post of Dean of Faculty, which initially rotated every 2 years. The history of the faculty's accommodation indicates how cost-effective all this was. Manson writes, "When I first knew the faculty, which was in 1936, we had 2 rooms in the Whitworth corridor. Later, we moved to a better establishment with 4 rooms and an emergency exit on the top floor of William Deacon's bank premises. The building of the large extension to the Faculty of Arts meant that we were able to surrender our attics in the bank buildings to the extramural department and move over to more magnificent accommodation in what was once the home of the Dancers of the Tiller Troupe." 2. Baptist college tutors gained full involvement in the university faculty. Baptist college tutors were recognised lecturers in the faculty. Among the biblical scholars were Marshall, Henry Townsend, and later George Farr. They were teaching university students and able to be Dean of Faculty. Marshall became Dean in 1914. Henry Townsend, who succeeded Marshall as principal of the Baptist College, was Dean in 1926. Baptist College tutors were also able to hold university professorships. However, I've not found one who did this. Some of these provisions lapsed over time. After World War II and the Education Act introducing compulsory school religious education, the number of faculty members employed directly by the university expanded substantially. Deans were appointed internally and professors were appointed through regular university processes. Colleges also moved towards training more in skills and knowledge related to pastoral ministry, making university courses less central. This culminated in the inter-college collaboration that produced the Faith in Living BA programme in the 1990s, validated by the university but taught separately. Conversely, college tutors eventually stopped lecturing at the university around the time of the millennium. However, links through degree validation and the Earhart Biblical Studies Research Seminar did maintain some university involvement for more recent college biblical scholars such as Martin Scott and Sean Winter. 3. Baptists were not disadvantaged in university theological appointments. Larson's comment on the Rylands Chair continues. The Rylands Chair has provided a home for highly gifted scholars who would have been otherwise excluded from a position at the apex of British academic life owing to their religious convictions. Peake was a Methodist, Dodd a Congregationalist, Manson a Presbyterian, and Bruce a member of the so-called Plymouth Brethren. Only after underlining this point this conclusively did the Faculty of Theology finally allow an Anglican, Barnabas Lindars, to hold the chair. Although none of these professors were Baptists, a Baptist who the faculty did appoint was Ralph Martin, who came to the university after being viewed as too radical by London Bible College. The one other Baptist who I'm aware of being appointed by the faculty, now the Department of Religions and Theology, is myself. I'm open to any suggestions of other names. However, the most noted Baptist biblical scholar in the university's history is H.H. Rowley. He was Professor of Semitic, later Hebrew, language and literature. This post was in the Faculty of Arts, but he was heavily involved in the Faculty of Theology. H.H. Rowley was a key figure in post-war development. Manson writes about the Scarborough Committee that led to the allocation of large sums of money by the Treasury for the encouragement of Oriental studies in the universities. Rowley's energy and enterprise secured a substantial share of these resources for Manchester University. This led to large expansion in Semitic studies and some expansion in theology. Point 4. Baptists were able to teach and research in line with Baptist principles under university auspices and with university resources. Rogerson sees Scott's key attitude in teaching on religion as being summed up in the quote from J.W. Colenso, that effectively appeals to Scott's work. Our children must be taught to recognise the voice of God's Spirit in whatever way, by whatever ministry he vouchsafes to speak to the children of men. Rogerson continues, for Scott, it was the consciences of individual men and women that recognised the work of the Spirit, and human conscience was the final arbiter of truth, above any ecclesiastical hierarchy or authority. Although this lacks the congregational dimension of the Baptist Union principle that each church has liberty under the guidance of the Holy Spirit to interpret and administer Christ's laws, it fits with Owens College being set on a course leading to teaching in ways closer to Baptist principles than to those of more directive denominations. As Preston notes, the first basis of the university teaching was the prohibition of any religious test anywhere in the university for staff or student. Manson expands on this. No question should be asked in the examination which calls for expression of religious beliefs. That proviso still holds when Manson's writing. And each year a small committee of the faculty scrutinises all examination papers in theology to see that the rule is complied with. This does reinforce other factors making evangelism or insistence on the authority of Christ or Scripture inappropriate in a university setting, although these were no doubt being taught in the Baptist College. However, the converse effect of the ban on religious tests is that lecturers can teach on a range of views on a biblical text without laying down what religious or non-religious views should be taken of it. Hooker comments, it is said that Peake often set out the evidence before his students and left them to make up their own minds on the matter, a habit which exasperated those who were used to being given clear-cut answers on every question. She makes similar points about Manson and Bruce. This spirit of teaching works well with the Baptist principle that baptism, and by implication matters of religious belief, are to be based on a person's own professing of faith. A person maintains their own agency. Again, this works well for Baptists, but less so for more centrally directive denominations. There's much more freedom in university research than in teaching. In particular at Manchester, faculty members were free to publish on subjects designed to help churches. The most large-scale instance is Peake's commentary. On an even bigger overall scale is the output of F.F. Bruce, whose university research was almost all directed, in one way or another, to what he would have seen as advancing the gospel. My own experience is that university is not differentiated between my directly historical research outputs and church-focused outputs such as my commentary on Galatians. 5. Involvement with the faculty reinforced tendencies to focus on language skills and textual criticism. Shepherd offers a characterisation of J.T. Marshall. With no pastoral experience, his interests were primarily academic, his specialist field being Palestinian Syriac studies. And there's then a quote from the Baptist Times along those lines. The second tutor under Marshall was Herbert Ellis, who was a specialist in classics. The emphasis on languages at the college is fitted with the University of Manchester BD being, according to Preston, the most comprehensive initials theology degree in the country, especially in its linguistic demands. This might appear to sit strangely with the college's theological conservatism. However, it was part of the prevalent emphasis on biblical criticism, both textual criticism, seeking the original version of a text, and broader types of criticism focusing on form and origins of text. For textual criticism, the Rylands Library acquired many manuscripts. One that I learned of recently was a then newly made copy of a medieval Syriac manuscript. This looks surprising when the library was buying many actual ancient manuscripts, However, it makes sense in the teaching culture where students were learning to compare manuscripts to gain skills in deciding on the earliest textual form. Manchester was not alone in this. Some students at Rawdon Baptist College in Yorkshire were also studying Syriac. The impression one gets is of widespread emphasis on church ministers being able to navigate decisions about what was original biblical text, which was seen as important in serving congregations. This would be compatible with conservative theology. If what matters is biblical text, determining the text becomes key. Point 6, involvement with the Faculty of Theology reinforced a tendency to adopt critical biblical scholarship. Alongside textual criticism, the colleges put their students through an education in more complex and potentially controversial forms of criticism, generally associated with German scholarship. Hooker notes how it was said that through Peake's teaching and commentary, he did more than any other scholar to introduce the critical study of the Bible to this country. Hooker comments that Peake was a primitive Methodist, a denomination more noted for its evangelical favour than for theological radicalism. And she adds, it was perhaps precisely because Peake himself embodied this both personal piety and rigorous scholarship that he was able to introduce a new approach to the Bible across the country. If this was true for the whole country, it was no doubt particularly true for J.T. Marshall and the Manchester Bible Baptist College, built firmly into a structure in which Peake led biblical studies teaching. We can expect the Baptists sharing Peake's conservative piety were also generally sharing his confidence that critical biblical scholarship was fully compatible with their Christianity. In retrospect, such confidence may have been somewhat naive. Many lines of thought in critical scholarship of the time were rather speculative, some were effectively anti-Semitic. There were also often rationalist assumptions that would produce disconnects between ministers and congregations. On the other hand, many critical lines of inquiry were simply realistic facing of the complexities of biblical texts. In the end, students' encounter with critical theories were probably less problematic than the more basic question of balance in how they were spending their training time. Hooker comments that Peake pays far more attention to critical questions than to the more theological issues with which many of us are concerned today. Students on the Manchester BD were spending a great proportion of their time on language study and other textual academic skills rather than on development of the rest of the range of skills to help congregations. Point 7 is kind of self-evident. Through their involvement in the faculty, the denominational theological colleges built a lasting pattern of collaboration with each other, and the conclusions are basically the same as the headings. Thank you.
Thank you.